Good morning. My name is Mike Opat, and I'm a senior project manager with Houston Engineering. My presentation today will not focus on one particular project, but I'm going to cover a broad category of projects and the changes we are seeing in the way water managers and other stakeholders throughout North Dakota are looking at them. I'm specifically referring to projects that have long been referred to as drainage, but should be looked at as one piece of a broader approach to water management. With agriculture being a leading industry in North Dakota since the state was founded, surface water drainage has long been a vital tool for improving the state's economy through increased crop production. What often gets overlooked are the other benefits provided by projects that improve conveyance, as they often provide flood control benefits for rural residences, downstream communities, and the larger watershed, not to mention the fact that they provide economic benefits to the local economies that are often driven by agriculture. One recent example of this is the construction of Walsh County Drain 87 near Grafton. This newly created legal assessment drain serves a benefit area of nearly 33,000 acres, while also providing critical flood risk reduction benefits as part of the city's recently constructed flood control project. In recent years, we have seen efforts to quantify and recognize these ancillary benefits, and we are also seeing somewhat of a paradigm shift as stakeholders are looking at the larger picture and taking a more holistic approach to water management. Perhaps this concept is not entirely new, but we are certainly seeing a renewed focus on certain aspects, along with considerations for new thoughts and technologies. The result of this is that we are seeing a concerted effort toward treating water as the precious resource that it is, while looking for ways to manage that resource in times of excess and times of scarcity. We're also taking a closer look at the impacts associated with these types of water management projects, both positive and negative. In many cases, this means we have to take a new look at the old way we've been doing things. What are we seeing in terms of this changing approach? Let's touch on a few key issues here. Subsurface water management, more commonly referred to as tiling, has become commonplace throughout many areas of the state, and that trend looks to continue as producers recognize the value of investing in that technology. Not only are we seeing ag producers utilizing tile to remove excess water from their fields, but we're also seeing them utilize their subsurface infrastructure to manage available moisture during drier periods. We're also seeing great interest in utilizing these systems to better manage nutrients, with the goal of not only maximizing crop production and economic benefits, but also improving water quality for a much larger population of stakeholders. The Red River Basin Commission is currently undertaking an important pilot study that will analyze the integration of surface and subsurface water management on a watershed level, and the results could have significant effects on how we manage water in North Dakota and throughout the world. This pilot study will involve a watershed area of more than 8,000 acres that is currently served by an existing legal assessment drain. The study will allow for an integrated system of surface and subsurface drainage measures to be compared to a control area without significant subsurface improvements, which will allow for an analysis of the associated water quality and water quantity benefits and impacts. Looking at surface water management, we have learned a lot about the many watersheds that make up the drainage basins throughout the state. In the eastern part of the state, we have a better understanding on the impacts that retention and conveyance projects have on local and regional flooding that have been so common in recent years. We know that retention is not the silver bullet to solving these flooding problems, and we also know that in some locations, improved conveyance can actually reduce downstream flooding. What is clear is that looking at each project as a piece of a larger puzzle allows us to address local needs while still providing benefits to the watershed as a whole. Perhaps the most obvious obstacle to advancing watershed management plans and projects is the funding associated with improving or constructing the necessary infrastructure. There are also hurdles in the form of existing perceptions and the need for education and outreach. For now, let's focus on the physical tools needed to move these projects forward. In order to realize the benefits of an integrated approach to surface and subsurface water management, we need adequate outlets to convey the water downstream in a manner that minimizes adverse impacts. These outlets typically come in some form of a surface drain, either natural or artificial, and they can be privately constructed and maintained or publicly constructed and operated. Let's focus on the public facilities such as legal assessment drains for now. Many of these existing facilities found throughout the state are antiquated, with many constructed in the early 1900s and many more constructed during a wave of construction in the 50s and 60s. Many of these drains cannot adequately handle the amount of water we are seeing during wetter cycles, and they provide a substandard level of service for the higher value crops we are now growing in many parts of the state. The old facilities also fail in many cases to provide adequate depth and access for tile outlets. As Roger Olson, the chairman of the Maple River Water Resource District, frequently points out, we don't see many 1960 Allis-Chalmers tractors being used for production agriculture these days, even if they've been well maintained. Farm equipment has improved over the years, and we need to think of water management the same way. Further advancement of the modern approach to water management may be limited by the ability to bring these existing facilities up to current standards and the ability to construct new facilities in areas that currently lack the necessary infrastructure. Watershed detention dams are an important component of the modern approach to water management. While they do not convey more water, they do take pressure off of downstream conveyance facilities and provide a tool for addressing adverse impacts that could result from some conveyance projects. And in that sense, their use as a tool is not necessarily a modern concept, but the tool could use some modernization. Here again, we saw many of these watershed dams constructed in the 1950s and 60s, and many of these facilities have exceeded their design lives and are in need of improvements. We may also require added features, such as gated controls or other enhancements that address water quality or natural resource benefits that are needed to meet current operational and regulatory requirements. This too has the potential to impact our ability to realize the benefits associated with modern water management if we can't address these needs in the future. So what have we learned, and what do we need to do to move forward with this approach? Let's start with a look at our public infrastructure. In some areas, the simple answer is that we need to construct new legal assessment drains and retention facilities that are designed to account for current standards and have an eye for what might come in the future. In other locations, we need to sharpen the existing tools we have. This might include expansions and improvements to our undersized facilities. For example, it's not uncommon to encounter a legal drain that is currently serving a much larger watershed than it was designed for, and we often see that drains were originally designed for a smaller design event than what our current standards would call for. So even without extending drains and expanding the watershed area they serve, we already see that many of these drains are lacking in terms of providing sufficient capacity. In addition to deficiencies related to capacity, we have also identified design improvements as a result of years of observations and studies. These would include considerations for stable side slopes, channel bottom slopes that mitigate erosion, and considerations that address the impacts that inundation can have on crop production. We can also incorporate improvements to road crossings and include controlled breakouts that allow us to mitigate issues that occur during high flow conditions. It's also important to incorporate design features that address modern farming equipment and practices that simply didn't exist when these facilities were originally constructed. These efforts constitute far more than maintenance and require a significant investment. Again, times have changed since much of this infrastructure was put in place, and we need to not only bring them up to current standards, but we also need to account for what might come about in the future. Similarly, with watershed retention dams, new facilities would certainly be beneficial in many areas, but we also need to make sure that our existing structures remain in operation and do so in a safe manner. This may require significant improvements to bring these structures up to current standards. There are a number of these efforts ongoing throughout the state, but the need far outweighs the available resources. Moving forward with this modern approach requires a significant investment. Such an investment is not simply an investment in individual projects, it's also an investment in the larger watershed in the state of North Dakota. As we've discussed, this approach not only benefits one of the state's largest economic engines, but it also has the potential to provide flood risk reduction and water quality benefits throughout the state. So how do we know that this is a worthwhile investment? For one, we routinely see local stakeholders vote to tax themselves to cover the local costs associated with developing and constructing the facilities necessary to advance this vision. We also see through the North Dakota State Water Commission's economic analysis process that these projects are providing benefits that exceed the cost of the investment from a financial standpoint, proving that these are wise investments of public and private funds. On that note, infrastructure projects like the ones we've discussed have often been constructed by government entities or publicly funded to some degree. These investments of public resources are critical to the advancement of improvements that provide benefits locally, regionally, and even nationally. Continued support for construction of improvements, as well as further study, educational efforts, and technological advancements, will help ensure that the modern approach to water management continues to lead our state to a more prosperous and healthier future. I'm looking forward to what we as water leaders are able to accomplish with water management throughout the state of North Dakota as we move into the future. Please stop by our booth and check out some of the exciting water projects we are working on and enjoy the rest of the virtual conference. Thank you.